What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Just want to give a shout out to the rest of the crew, Shy, Kelvin, and Jermaine. And for everyone who's tuning in, I hope that you support Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, and help make this show the best that it can be. I really want to give a shout out to the crew, Kelvin, Shy, and Jermaine. They've been really producing great content, and their videos about the NBA, their view of the NBA, subjects that they touched on, as well as NFL. They made exceptional videos and content. So I just want to give an extra shout out once again. Now, I know what I'm going to discuss and my response to it and my take on it is more of the exception than the rule. And it may not even be popular. But sometimes, well, a lot of times, the truth isn't popular. And what I'm getting at is, for all basketball fans, look what's taking place in the NBA right now. Just look what's taking place in the NBA right now. We see a passing of the torch taking place. We see a transition from post-super team to organizations who have developed their young players, developed their young talent. And as a result, they're benefiting big time. And the fruits of that labor is starting to sprout. And the league is slowly, and the people who cover the league is slowly but surely taking notice. When you look at the NBA standings, when you see teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves or the T-Wolves, they're in first place in the Western Conference. The Oklahoma City Thunder, I believe they're tied for second place in the Western Conference. The Denver Nuggets, the defending NBA champions, built their core roster over the past 7 years. 8 years after they drafted Nikola Jokic, I believe in the 2015 NBA draft. And then 2 years later, Jamal Murray in the 2017 NBA draft. And then a couple years later, I think the 2019 draft, they selected Michael Porter Jr. Look at the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic on second place in the Eastern Conference. And it's not a fluke because they've beaten quite a good teams, plenty of good teams so far this season to achieve their record. It's not a fluke. It's not a fluke. The Houston Rockets have improved from last year. They're basically playing 500 basketball. The Sacramento Kings had the highest rated offense in basketball last year. Made the playoffs, fought Golden State Warriors to a 7th game. The defending champion Golden State Warriors, mind you. The young teams are taking over. But when you look at these young men in this photo here, they all used to play and represent and were drafted in some form or fashion by the Los Angeles Lakers. And every player that you see in that picture, with the exception of D'Angelo Russell, who is playing for the Lakers in his second incarnation with the franchise. But outside of that, and then you have additional players who was drafted by this franchise from 2014 to 2018. Two gentlemen who is not included in this picture, in this photo, is Mo Wagner, who is playing a significant role for the Orlando Magic, along with his brother, Fritz Wagner. Won a gold medal at the FIBA basketball tournament this past summer. Thomas Bryant, when drafted out of the University of Indiana, he was shooting 40% from three. 40%. Then you had Svi Mykhailiuk from the University of Kansas, and I believe he was the nation's top three-point shooter, or at least top three. One of the top three long-distance shooters entering the NBA in 2018. And what this draft class from 2014 to 2018 represent is the most disrespected group of young NBA players in the history of professional basketball. The most disrespected, the most overlooked, with the impression that they was most expendable. But considering what has happened to the Los Angeles Lakers over the past 3 years, going to this fourth year after the bubble championship, they are the most irreplaceable. And I know that basketball fans, whoever come across this video, they're not going to hear this nowhere else. But when you break down the talent of each player, they all stand out in their own unique fashion. And I'm going to be talking about this issue, about this situation, throughout the course of this NBA season and moving forward. A total of 14 drafted players were removed from this franchise. And they've been trying to fill that void since. Even with two superstar franchise players, and a season and a half ago, or up until midway part of last season, they had three superstars, but they still couldn't fill the void of 14 drafted players. The most disrespected group of young men who's ever played professional basketball in the NBA. But what's ironic is, before all this started in 2018, many of basketball journalists, analysts, experts, pundits, fans, media, all said that the Lakers had the best young, deepest young core in the league. So how do you go from that reality to creating a false reality that they weren't any good? But as I said, I'm going to break this down stage by stage of why all of this that's been said about these young men over the past 4 years, since they all been let go, has been nothing but misnomers and fables. I'm going to identify it as fables, fiction. And now, when you look at the NBA landscape, the irony is the teams that are excelling now, and see, the counter argument by pundits or people who want to see a team win right away is they haven't won anything. But see, my argument is we'll never know what they could have done collectively as a unit, as a roster, as a team, if they had never been broken up and let go or traded off. And this is one of the most unfortunate stories in the history of professional basketball, because when you draft players, you draft them for a reason, especially when you draft them, as lottery players, when you draft players with the number 2 pick, the number 7 pick, well, you expect them. You're hoping that they have the talent to become cornerstones for your franchise. And when you look at all these players in this picture, not one of them had been proven to be a bust. Not one. Not one. Not one. This franchise did such an amazing job drafting. I don't even think that a lot of the fans really understood it. But as you look at the NBA landscape now, you don't see these teams out here shunning their young talent, trading them off, along with a multitude of draft picks. That type of mindset, that's in the past. That's distant memory. That's not going to win in today's NBA. And that's going to be for the foreseeable future. And what's sad about it is when you're a fan of a team and when you've watched basketball for a very long time and you see right before you what lies ahead. And now, who else is missing in this picture here? Okay. Yeah. Basically, when you see, and think about it, you let these young men develop, grow, and mature. Because when you're drafting young men in the league as one and done players, more than likely they're entering the NBA as 19-year-olds for the one and done players. And they may be 18 when you draft them. And they'll turn 19 sometime at some point during their rookie year. So logically, you're not going to win right away. And even in the past, prior to the changing of rules where high school players were allowed to declare entry into the NBA by the mid-90s, and they tried to solve that dilemma years later by compromising, and they came up with the one and done system. Well, even during the 80s and 90s, when you drafted a player like a Patrick Ewing or a Hakeem Olajuwon or a Michael Jordan or a Charles Barkley or a Clyde Drexler or an Isaiah Thomas, well, if you look back at those teams, it took them 5 years before you could say they're ready to compete for a championship, to be prime contenders. And they were being drafted at the age of 21, 22 years old. And I could never understand why these young men were expected to win right out the bat and do so in a Western Conference that had a prime Golden State with Kevin Durant, a prime James Harden, and at the time, Chris Paul in Houston. San Antonio was still a contender with Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge. And Denver was on the rise as a franchise. But what's astonishing is when you look at the metric, when you look at what they really did, they were more competitive throughout the course of the game than the team that's out there right now. That's the irony of it. So imagine if you let these young men grow and develop, give them 3 to 4 years, and then you bring in the right star free agent to play with them, to anchor them, to elevate them. There's no telling where the Lakers would be at right now. The Los Angeles Lakers, instead of scrambling, trying to, create a roster on a yearly basis, bringing in players left and right. So when I look at these young men again, these 14 drafted players, and there's some players, is about 3 players missing from this picture because they were drafted in 2018 after the focus of the franchise went from a tremendous future to the ultimate win now scenario. And more often than not, when you adapt or take on that win now mentality, you're going to wind up losing more than you hope or anticipate of winning. It's guaranteed. And it's not just in basketball. I've seen it in the NFL. I've seen it in Major League Baseball. Ultimately, the formula doesn't work, especially long term, because when you go win now, it's a short term venture anyway. So anything worthwhile takes time to build. And yes, you will go through disappointment. You want to see the team win right away. And they're this close to figuring it out. They just need more experience. But as long as they're competing and improving individually, oh man, eventually they're going to break through. That's what happened with Golden State. They drafted Steph Curry in the 2009 draft. 2 years later, Klay Thompson. A year later, Draymond Green and Harrison Barnes. They got the foundation established. Then they started to bring in the complementary pieces. The Andrew Bogut's and the Andre Iguodala's, the Leandro Barbosas, the Maurice Spates. And then 6 years later, they became NBA world champions. It takes time. It takes patience. But because of the fact that Golden State built their championship roster from scratch, that's why they've had close to a 10-year run and won 4 championships in 8 years. When you go the shortcut route, you're not going to win like that. And things are going to break down by year 4. Actually, really, by year 3, to tell you the truth. Especially when you're playing in this Western Conference. So, as a fan, I will always respect these young men because they represented the jersey and the team and the franchise and the fans when they were starting over after the late, great Kobe Bryant retired in 2016. They were willing to represent the jersey when we were starting all over again. You see, so when you look at it, everything that the team is trying to do now over these past 4 or 5 seasons stands on the shoulders of these young men. I know it's a very unpopular take, and I get it. But when you weed out all of the commentary that we hear on a daily basis, and you got to win right now, when you filter all that out and you look at the situation for exactly what it is, the answer is staring us red in the face. Which means that the Los Angeles Lakers were led to relinquish the best young core in the history of the NBA in this one and done era. And I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break it down in the near future and beyond. When the situation calls for it, man, and when I feel obligated or inspired to, I don't want to say obligated, but whenever I feel inspired to discuss this in further detail, because that young core is missed. That young core is missed. But it's not going to be said in this current situation. And I understand that. But the fact remains that they're missed. And to show you that they're missed, all these teams out here that stuck to the plan, that understood that there's a long-term view in hand and that you will be rewarded long-term by staying the course. The irony is they were ahead of the curve. They were 5 years ahead of the curve, but they was caught up in the windstorm of win now in the super team era. And as a result, they was relinquished. But in a normal basketball situation and environment, fans would have been saying, Oh man, give us 3 years, give us 3, 4 years. Oh man, this young they're gonna come of age, they're gonna be ready to rock and roll, they're gonna be ready to dominate. That would have been the conversation. There's no doubt in my mind. But it's all about bad timing, and they were a victim of circumstance. But ironically, they're missed now more than ever before. So as I said, I'll be touching on this whenever the inspiration motivates me to do so. But like I said, the most unfortunate and disheartening aspect about all this is we're going to experience a team that that relinquished an era of true Laker basketball before it truly started. Think about that. Most teams, they start from the bottom and move the way up. The Lakers have been operating in reverse since all this started in 2018. When he brought in a certain player who had nothing on his mind but winning now and bringing in multiple superstars. And they've been struggling outside of that one season at the expense of what's proving to be a very long time. A very, very long time. But this is the most disrespected group of basketball players ever. And they were all drafted by the same team. That's what's crazy about it. That's what's crazy about it to me. But I just want to touch on that. And as I said, I will be expounding on this a many a time and a many a day. This is the greatest young core in the history of professional basketball, bar none. But until next time, this is JB for BTB Behind the Bench.